In the cold depths of space, where survival is measured in heartbeats and humanity's compassion becomes their greatest weapon, one medic will discover that the universe's most feared predator shares something unexpected with Earth's children: the desperate need to be saved. When duty calls and death whispers, will human kindness prove stronger than 1,000,000 years of evolutionary programming? What happens when the hunter becomes the hunted, and the only hand extended in mercy belongs to the very species they were designed to destroy? Doctor.
Sarah Chen pressed her gloved hand against the twisted metal hull of what had once been a Caliph warship. The emergency beacon that had drawn her rescue shuttle to this remote sector of the Outer Rim continued its monotonous pulse, echoing through her helmet's communication system.
Around her, the debris field stretched for kilometers, a graveyard of both human and alien vessels that told the story of a battle fought 3 days ago. "Biosigns are faint, but they're definitely there," called out her partner, Lieutenant Marcus Webb, as he maneuvered through a gap in the destroyer's hull. "Whatever's alive in there won't be for much longer." Sarah followed him into the darkened corridor, her medical scanner sweeping left and right. The Caliph ship had taken a direct hit from a plasma torpedo, and the damage was extensive. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting eerie shadows on walls that had been warped by intense heat. The artificial gravity was failing, causing loose debris to drift past them like metallic snow. As they moved deeper into the vessel, Sarah's scanner began picking up stronger readings. The signature was unlike anything in her medical database, but the elevated stress hormones and rapid cellular degradation were universal indicators of a being in severe distress. They rounded a corner and found themselves in what appeared to be the ship's medical bay, though the alien architecture made everything seem foreign and threatening.
"There!"
Webb pointed to a section where several support beams had collapsed, creating a makeshift prison of twisted metal and sparking electrical conduits. Sarah approached carefully, her headlamp cutting through the darkness. What she saw made her stop breathing for a moment. Trapped beneath the debris was a creature that should have been the stuff of nightmares. The Caliph warrior was massive, easily 3 meters tall, even in its current crumpled position. Its exoskeleton was a deep purple-black, marked with ritual scars that spoke of countless battles. 6 powerful limbs ended in claws that could have torn through her environmental suit with ease. The creature's head was elongated, featuring 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern and a mouth filled with razor-sharp teeth, designed for tearing flesh. But despite its fearsome appearance, the alien was clearly dying. Green blood had pooled beneath its body, and several of its limbs were bent at unnatural angles. One of the support beams had pierced through its thorax, and Sarah could see the rhythmic pulsing of its jewel hearts growing weaker with each passing minute. "Sarah, we need to go." Webb's voice was tense. "If this thing wakes up—" "It's not going to wake up," Sarah replied, already moving toward her medical kit. "Not without help." Webb grabbed her arm. "Are you insane? That's a Caliph hunter-killer. Those things have been slaughtering our colonies for 5 years. It would rip you apart without a second thought." Sarah looked at him steadily. "Right now, it's a patient." And I took an oath. She knelt beside the trapped alien, ignoring Webb's continued protests. Her scanner revealed internal bleeding, 3 shattered limbs, and what appeared to be a punctured lung-equivalent organ. By all rights, the creature should have been dead already. The fact that it was still alive spoke to the incredible resilience of careless physiology. Working quickly, Sarah began injecting a broad-spectrum coagulant into the alien system. She had no idea if human medications would work on Caliph biology, but the alternatives were to do nothing and watch it die, or to try and fail. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she sealed the worst of the wounds and stabilized the creature's vital signs. The alien's eyes suddenly snapped open, all 4 focusing on her with an intensity that made her blood freeze. For a moment, predator and human stared at each other across the gulf of species and war. Sarah could see her own reflection in those alien eyes, a tiny figure in an environmental suit, vulnerable and alone. The Caliph's mouth opened, revealing those terrible teeth, and a sound emerged that might have been speech. The universal translator in Sarah's helmet struggled with the alien language before finally producing a rough approximation. "Why, help, enemy?" Sarah continued working, her hands steady despite her racing heart. "Because you're hurt," she said simply. The alien's head tilted slightly, a gesture that seemed almost human in its confusion. "Human healer?" "Human medic," Sarah corrected, applying an emergency respirator to the alien's breathing passages. "And you're my patient." For the next hour, Sarah worked with quiet determination, while Webb kept watch at the entrance to the medical bay. She used plasma cutters to carefully remove the debris pinning the Kalath warrior, then employed emergency medical foam to seal its wounds. The alien remained conscious throughout the procedure, watching her every move with those unblinking eyes. As Sarah worked, she found herself studying the creature's anatomy with professional interest. Despite their fearsome reputation, the Kalath were clearly intelligent beings. Their medical bay contained sophisticated equipment, and the warrior's injuries showed evidence of previous medical treatment. Scars crisscrossed its exoskeleton in patterns that suggested not just combat, but careful medical intervention. "Your people," the alien spoke again, its voice growing stronger as Sarah's treatment began to take effect. "They flee when they see Kalath." "Most do," Sarah admitted, checking the alien's blood pressure with an adapted cuff.
"Your species has quite a reputation. We hunt."
"We kill. It is our way." The alien's four eyes studied her face. "But you do not flee. Running away doesn't help anyone get better." The alien was quiet for a long moment, processing this response. When it spoke again, there was something different in its tone. "I am Thexai, Hunter Prime of the Third Talon. I have killed many of your kind. I'm Dr. Sarah Chen, and right now you're alive because I'm very good at keeping people from dying." Sarah's voice remained steady and professional. "What you did before doesn't change what you need now." Webb's voice crackled through the comm. "Sarah, we've got company. 3 Kalath interceptors just dropped out of hyperspace. They'll be here in 10 minutes. Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. If the Kalath found a human medic treating one of their own, the implications could be catastrophic. But looking at Thexai, she realized the alien was thinking the same thing. "They come for me," the Kalath warrior said. "You must go, human healer. My pod brothers will not understand your kindness." Sarah looked at her patient's readings. The alien was stabilized, but still critical. Moving it now would likely undo all her work and possibly kill it. But staying would mean capture or death for both her and Webb. "Can you travel?" she asked. Thexai attempted to rise, then fell back with a pained hiss. "No. The damage is too great." Webb appeared in the doorway, his face grim behind his visor. "Sarah, we have to go. Now." Sarah looked between her patient and her partner, her mind racing. Everything in her training told her to never abandon a patient, but everything in her survival instincts screamed at her to run. The sound of approaching engines was beginning to echo through the hull of the damaged ship. "There is another way," Thexai said quietly. "My pod brothers will not harm you if I vouch for your conduct. But you must understand, showing mercy to a Kalath means you will be marked, forever changed in the eyes of my people." Sarah met the alien's gaze. In those 4 eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected to find in a Kalath warrior. Gratitude, and perhaps the beginning of respect. The engines were getting closer now, and Sarah could hear Webb chambering a round in his rifle. She had seconds to make a decision that would change everything. Standing up, she looked down at Thexai and made her choice. Then I guess we're about to find out what that means. The medical bay filled with the sound of approaching Kalath ships, and Sarah Chen prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that her simple act of compassion had just altered the course of an interstellar war in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The sound of cutting torches echoed through the damaged Kalath warship as 3 massive forms moved through the breach they had carved in the hull. Sarah stood protectively near Thexai, her medical kit clutched in her hands like a shield. Webb had positioned himself near the corridor entrance, his rifle ready but lowered in a gesture that she hoped the aliens would interpret as non-threatening. The first Kalath warrior to enter the medical bay was even larger than Thexai, its exoskeleton bearing the deep scarification of a senior combat veteran. Behind it came 2 others, their movements coordinated and deadly. All 3 carried weapons that hummed with barely contained energy, and their 4 eyes swept the room with predatory efficiency. The lead warrior's gaze fixed on Thexai, then shifted to Sarah with unmistakable hostility. When it spoke, its voice was a low growl that the translator struggled to pass. "Thexai, why does this soft flesh still breathe?" Thexai struggled to sit up straighter, wincing as the movement aggravated his injuries. "Graktol, this human is under my protection. She has rendered aid according to her customs." "Aid?" The warrior called Graktol took a step closer to Sarah, and she fought the urge to back away. "The humans are prey species. They do not aid the Kalath. They flee, or they die." "This one stayed," Thexai replied firmly. "This one healed." Sarah could feel the tension in the room ratcheting up with each exchange. The 2 other Kalath had spread out, effectively surrounding her and Webb. Their weapons remained lowered, but she could see the readiness in their posture. "I am Kretal," one of the other warriors spoke, addressing Sarah directly. "You have seen our brother wounded. You know his strength. Why did you not flee?" Sarah took a deep breath, knowing that her next words could determine whether she lived to see another day. "In my profession, we have a saying, first, do no harm. When I see someone injured, I help them. It doesn't matter who they are or what they've done." Graktol's head tilted in what she was beginning to recognize as the Caliph expression of confusion. "This is inefficient. The weak should die so the strong can survive." "Maybe," Sarah said, surprising herself with her steadiness. "But sometimes the strong only become strong because someone helped them when they were weak." The three Caliph warriors exchanged a rapid conversation in their own language, too fast for the translator to follow. Sarah caught fragments of meaning. Duty, honor, unprecedented, dangerous. Dexhay interjected occasionally, his voice carrying an authority that seemed to give the others pause. Finally, Graktol turned back to Sarah. "Thexai speaks of a debt. In Caliph culture, such debts are not taken lightly." "I don't want anything from him," Sarah said quickly. "I just did what any medic would do." "But you are not any medic," the third warrior said. "You are human. And humans are our enemies." "Are we?" Sarah asked. "I mean, I know our species are at war, but right here, right now, I'm just a doctor and he's just my patient. The war doesn't change that." Kretal moved closer, studying Sarah with an intensity that made her skin crawl. "You show no fear."
"I'm terrified," Sarah admitted.
"But being scared doesn't change what's right." There was a long moment of silence. Then Thexhai spoke again, his voice carrying a weight that seemed to surprise his companions. "I invoke the right of sanctuary. This human has shown honor. She will be taken to the Council of Talons." Graktol's posture stiffened. "Thexhai, you cannot be serious. The Council has never heard a human speak. They are not considered worthy of such honor." "Then it is time for that to change," Thexhay replied. "I have fought humans for 5 cycles. I have seen them run, seen them die, seen them fight with desperate courage, but I have never seen one stay to heal their enemy. This human has shown me something I did not know existed among her kind." Sarah felt Webb step closer to her, his tension radiating through his environmental suit. She could understand his concern. The right of sanctuary sounded formal and important, but it was also taking them deeper into alien territory with no guarantee of safe return. "What does that mean?" she asked. "The right of sanctuary? It means you will be brought before the highest authority of the Kalaith military," Graktol explained. "They will judge your actions and determine their significance. It is an honor that has never been extended to a human, and if they judge my actions negatively..." The warriors exchanged glances. Kretal answered with brutal honesty. "Then you will die, but you will die with honor. This is preferable to dying as prey." Sarah looked at Webb, who was shaking his head emphatically behind his visor. She understood his position. They had come here on a simple rescue mission and were now being offered passage to what amounted to the enemy's high command. It was either the opportunity of a lifetime or an elaborate form of suicide. But as she looked at Thexhai, still struggling to remain upright despite his injuries, she realized something important. For the first time since the war began, a human and a Caliph had shared something other than violence. Whether that meant anything in the larger context of the conflict remained to be seen, but it was a start. "If I go with you," Sarah said slowly, "I want my partner to be allowed to return to human space. He's not part of this." Webb started to protest, but Sarah cut him off with a look. "Marcus, someone needs to tell them what happened here. Someone needs to let them know that not all Caliph are monsters, and not all humans are cowards." Graktol considered this request. "The male may return to your space, but he will carry a message. He will tell your military leaders that a human healer travels under Caliph protection to speak before the Council of Talons. They will know that the nature of this war may be about to change." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. She wasn't just accepting sanctuary, she was potentially becoming an ambassador to a species that had been humanity's mortal enemy for 5 years. The responsibility was staggering. Over the next few hours, Sarah found herself aboard a Caliph medical transport, watching as Thexhai received proper treatment from his own kind. The alien medical technology was fascinating, utilizing bioregeneration techniques that were decades ahead of human science. But what struck her most was the care with which the Caliph medics treated their patient. These weren't the mindless killing machines that human propaganda had portrayed. They were intelligent beings, with their own culture, their own values, and their own capacity for loyalty and honor. Thexay remained conscious throughout the journey, and he spent much of his time answering Sarah's questions about Caliph society. She learned that their species had evolved on a harsh world where only the strongest survived, but that strength was measured not just in physical prowess, but in intelligence, loyalty, and honor.
The ritualistic scars that marked their exoskeletons weren't just trophies of battle, but records of their achievements and failures, readable by other Caliph like a living history.
Your people, Thexai said during one of their conversations. They fight well, but they fight afraid.
This makes them unpredictable. Fear can make people do terrible things, Sarah agreed, but it can also make them do incredible things. Sometimes the most courageous act is the one you do despite being afraid. This is a concept my people struggle with, Thexay admitted.
We eliminate fear through training and discipline. But perhaps, we eliminate something else as well. As they traveled deeper into Kala's space, Sarah began to understand the magnitude of what she had committed to.
The Council of Talons was comprised of the most senior military commanders of the Kalath fleet, beings who had spent their entire lives in warfare. They would view her through the lens of a 5-year conflict that had claimed thousands of lives on both sides. But she also began to understand something else. Thexay's decision to invoke the right of sanctuary wasn't just about honoring a debt. It was about challenging his own people's assumptions about humanity, just as her decision to treat him had challenged her own assumptions about the Caliph. As the transport ship approached the massive Caliph command station that served as mobile headquarters for their fleet, Sarah pressed her hand against the viewport and watched the alien structure grow larger. Somewhere in that maze of metal and crystal, she would soon stand before beings who had every reason to see her as an enemy and try to convince them that there might be another path forward. The war between humans and Caliph had begun with misunderstanding and fear. Perhaps, Sarah thought, it could end with something as simple as one person choosing to help another. Regardless of the barriers between them, the transport docked with a soft vibration that she felt through the deck plating. Through the viewport, she could see Caliph warriors waiting to escort her to whatever fate awaited. Sarah Chen, who had started this day as a simple military medic, was about to become something unprecedented. A human voice speaking to Caliph leadership in their own halls of power. She just hoped she would live long enough to say something worth hearing. The council chamber of the Caliph command station was unlike anything Sarah had ever imagined. The massive circular room stretched upward into shadows, its walls covered in what appeared to be living metal that pulsed with bioluminescent patterns. 12 raised platforms surrounded a central area where she now stood, each occupied by a Caliph warrior whose scarification marked them as legends among their own kind. Sarah had been given a basic translator device that allowed her to understand the alien language more clearly, but the weight of 12 sets of predatory eyes studying her every movement was almost overwhelming. These were beings who had commanded fleets in battles across dozens of star systems, who had personally led assaults on human colonies, who had dedicated their lives to the art of war. At the highest platform sat the Supreme Talon, a massive Caliph whose exoskeleton bore so many ritual scars that they formed intricate patterns across his entire body. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Human, you stand before the Council of Talons accused of an act so unprecedented that it lacks classification in our military codes. You have shown mercy to an enemy warrior in the midst of battle. Explain yourself. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of 2 civilizations resting on her shoulders. Honored Council, I am Dr. Sarah Chen, a military medic in the Human Defense Corps. 3 days ago, I responded to a distress beacon in the Outer Rim. When I found Hunter Prime Thexai trapped and dying in the wreckage of his ship, I did what my training and my conscience demanded. I treated his injuries. Your conscience, the Supreme Talon repeated, as if tasting an unfamiliar word. Explain this concept. It's the voice inside us that tells us right from wrong, Sarah said carefully. In that moment, seeing another being in pain, my conscience told me that helping him was more important than any other consideration. Murmurs arose from the council platforms, and Sarah caught fragments of conversation through her translator. The concepts she was describing seemed to be as alien to them as their warrior culture was to her. Another council member spoke up, her scarification indicating extensive combat experience in multiple theaters. Human, are you claiming that your species possesses an internal guidance system that supersedes military orders and survival instincts?
Not all of us listen to it, Sarah admitted.
But yes, most humans have something we call morality. It's not always the same for everyone, but it generally tells us to help those who are suffering, to protect those who can't protect themselves, and to treat others the way we would want to be treated. This is inefficient, declared a third council member. Such thinking would lead to the protection of the weak and the perpetuation of inferior genetic lines.
Sarah felt a flash of anger, but controlled it carefully.
Respectfully, council member, I disagree. Our strongest warriors often come from backgrounds where they needed help to survive their early years. Our greatest scientists and leaders frequently started as the children that others might have written off as weak. Sometimes what looks like weakness is just potential waiting for the right opportunity to grow. The Supreme Talon leaned forward on his platform. You speak of potential. What potential do you see in this act of mercy toward Hunter Prime Thexai? This was the moment Sarah had been preparing for during the entire journey to the command station. I see the potential for something that neither of our species has tried before. Not conquest, not subjugation, but coexistence. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Several council members began speaking at once, their voices rising in what Sarah's translator rendered as expressions of disbelief and outrage. The Supreme Talon called for silence with a gesture that was instantly obeyed.
Human, your species and ours have been at war for 5 cycles.
We have fundamental differences in our approach to existence itself. The Caliph believe in the supremacy of strength and the natural order of predator and prey. How do you propose to bridge such a gap?
Sarah looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of each council member in turn.
Because despite those differences, we both value honor. Thexai could have told his rescue party to kill me. Instead, he honored the debt he felt he owed and invoked the right of sanctuary. You could have simply executed me as an enemy spy. Instead, you honored his request and brought me here to speak. These are not the actions of mindless killing machines. They're the actions of beings who understand concepts like obligation, respect, and fair dealing. The human speaks truth, came a familiar voice from the chamber's entrance. Thexai entered, supported by a medical harness but moving under his own power. His presence seemed to shift the entire dynamic of the room. Council of Talons, I have fought this species for 5 cycles. I have studied their tactics, their psychology, their capabilities. But until 3 days ago, I had never experienced their capacity for mercy. The Supreme Talon's 4 eyes focused on the Hunter Prime. Thexai, your combat record is without question, but this human has clearly affected your judgment. Do you truly believe that showing mercy to enemies will make us stronger? I believe that understanding our enemies will make us stronger, Thexai replied. For 5 cycles, we have treated humans as simple prey animals, driven by fear and desperation. But Dr. Chen was neither fearful nor desperate when she chose to save my life. She was making a calculated decision based on principles that guided her actions even when those actions put her at risk. Another council member interjected, even if we accept that some humans possess these moral instincts, how does this change the fundamental nature of our conflict? Our species require different resources, different territories. War is inevitable. Sarah had been thinking about this question for hours. Maybe war was inevitable when we first met, but it doesn't have to remain inevitable. Both our species are explorers. Both are intelligent, adaptable, capable of growth. The galaxy is vast enough for both of us, but more than that, both of us are stronger when we face external challenges than when we fight each other. External challenges? The Supreme Talon's tone suggested genuine curiosity. The galaxy isn't empty except for humans and Caliph, Sarah said. There are other species out there, some of which may be far more dangerous than either of us. There are natural disasters, cosmic phenomena, resource scarcities that affect everyone. When those challenges arise, wouldn't we be better facing them as allies rather than as weakened enemies who've spent years destroying each other? The council chamber fell silent as the implications of her words sank in. Sarah could see the Caliph leadership processing the concept of cooperation between species that had been mortal enemies. Even if such cooperation were theoretically possible, said one council member, the practical obstacles would be enormous. Our species communicate differently, think differently, value different things. How would such an alliance function? Thexai stepped forward. The same way Dr. Chen and I functioned in that medical bay. We found common ground in shared respect and mutual benefit. She gained knowledge about Kayla physiology that could help her treat future patients. I gained insight into human psychology that could change how we approach future conflicts. Both of us gained something more valuable than victory, understanding. The Supreme Talon was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could sense that this was the crucial decision point. When he finally spoke, his words were measured and careful. Dr. Chen, your proposal is unprecedented. If we were to consider the possibility of coexistence rather than conquest, what would you suggest as a first step? Sarah felt her heart racing, but kept her voice steady.
A joint medical exchange program.
Caliph and human medics working together to treat casualties from both species. Medicine is one of the few areas where our goals are naturally aligned. We both want to preserve life and reduce suffering. It would allow our people to work together toward a common goal while learning about each other as individuals rather than as enemies. This is highly irregular, muttered one council member, but Sarah noticed that none of them were rejecting the idea outright. Irregular situations require irregular solutions, the Supreme Talon said. Taxi, you will serve as liaison for this proposed medical exchange. Dr. Chen, you will return to human space and present this proposal to your leadership. If they agree to the exchange, we will consider it a test of whether broader cooperation is possible. Sarah felt a surge of hope, but she also understood the fragility of what they were building. Supreme Talon, may I ask what will happen if the exchange program fails? If our species prove unable to work together even in medicine? The Supreme Talon's expression was unreadable. Then we will know that war is truly inevitable, and we will prosecute it with the knowledge that we attempted an alternative. As the council session concluded and Sarah was escorted back to the transport that would take her home, she reflected on how much had changed in just 3 days. She had started as a simple medic responding to a distress call. She was returning as an unofficial ambassador, carrying the first real hope for peace that either species had seen in 5 years. But more than that, she had discovered something profound about both humans and Caliph. Despite their different evolution, different cultures, different approaches to existence, both species were capable of growth, of changing their perspectives when presented with new information. The Caliph Council could have dismissed her out of hand, but they had listened. Thexai could have remained trapped in his old thinking, but he had advocated for change. As the transport ship left the Caliph command station behind, Sarah pressed her hand against the viewport once more. Somewhere in human space, military leaders would soon receive the most important message in their species' recent history. The success or failure of what followed would determine whether two civilizations would continue on a path of mutual destruction or take the first tentative steps towards something that had never existed before. A galaxy where strength was measured not just in military might, but in the courage to extend a helping hand to those who needed it most. The war between humans and Caliph had begun with first contact gone wrong. Perhaps it would end with a simple recognition that both species, despite their differences, shared something fundamental: the capacity to choose compassion over conflict when the stakes were high enough to demand their very best. Dr. Sarah Chen had learned that sometimes the most important medical intervention wasn't treating a wound or curing a disease. Sometimes it was healing the deeper injuries that kept entire civilizations from reaching their full potential. And sometimes all it took was one person willing to stay when everyone else had reasons to run away.